Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's panel discussion celebrating Renfrew's milestone 100,000 patients treated. We're really very excited about this and very excited to be here with four amazing alums who have volunteered their time to share a little bit with you all about their journey in recovery and treatment, and also answer some questions for you all. So before we get started hearing from our alums, I want to give a little bit of time for those who haven't been able to log on just yet, and just give you all a few reminders about some of the alumni services that we do offer at Renfrew. So up on your screen right now, you'll see that we have a wealth of resources for our alumni. You can find all of these on the alumni page at renfrewcenter.com. So you'll find information about our annual reunions, both residential and non-residential, the community workshops that we're hosting at different sites and different places, the on-site reunions and workshops we have, as well as the virtual events for those who either can't make it to the site for whatever reason or have participated in our Renfrew at Home programming, as well as our recovery blog, which features different blog posts from an array of staff, alums, parents, just a lot of different perspectives on treatment, recovery, and kind of what it's like to live in the world when you're going through recovery, as well as our biannual newsletter, Connections, which is just for alums. It features Voices of Recovery, which are some of the alums' stories that we will hear tonight, have actually written for our Voices of Recovery before, as well as our monthly webinars. So those we have running currently. So coming up in August, we will have a rebroadcast of Chelsea Dorita's From Self-Criticism to Self-Compassion in Eating Disorder Recovery, which is a really amazing webinar we hosted earlier this year. And Chelsea does a great job of just kind of talking about how we can work on those elements of self-compassion and incorporating them into our lives a little bit more. And then we also will have new webinars in September. I'll be presenting on grind culture and hustle culture and how it impacts our eating disorder recovery. And then in October, we're really excited to have Ashley Moser presenting on further exploring romantic relationships in the context of eating disorder recovery. So this is a really cool one. Ashley did kind of part one of this earlier in the year and got such great feedback. We wanted to follow up with a little bit of part two. We also want to remind you all that if you've attended either of our residential sites in Philadelphia or in Coconut Creek, Florida, we are offering still our monthly residential support, alumni support group. So the next dates for this are August 22nd, and then you'll see the dates through the end of the year on there as well. So this is a great way to get a little bit more support if you need it. We also are continuing to offer our virtual BIPOC and SAGE groups. These are outpatient groups that alums can join just to, get a little more support on these specific areas that are going to impact recovery and treatment as well. So these are great options if you're looking for a little bit more support and feel connected to these groups. And then finally, if you are a podcast fan, don't forget to listen to our All Bodies, All Foods podcast. So Dr. Sam DeCaro and Ashley Vicari host this podcast and come out with great topics related to eating disorders, mental health, body image, and are just really, really helpful. So that is all I have to share with you all to get us started. So I will stop sharing and introduce you all to our alums, if you all want to come off camera. So we'll be hearing from each of our alums tonight, and we will start by hearing from Asia, who will tell us a little bit about themselves and a little bit about their recovery journey. And then we will move on and we will hear from Cheri second, then Elizabeth, and then Stefanie. And then we'll have time for Q&A afterwards. So if you all have questions during any of the alums speaking, please feel free to start to put that in the Q&A. And we will get to that at the end once everyone has shared. Okay. All right. Thank you all. Asia, I will turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Erin. My name is Asia. My pronouns are they and he. I'm 31 years old. I was at Renfrew 3 times in 2019, at another treatment center in 2020, and then I was back at Renfrew last year. So it's definitely been a really difficult journey in my recovery. The main thing that I've struggled with is just being a person, a plus size person with anorexia, and just feeling like I can't recover in this body. And especially since I've gained a lot of weight in recovery, it's felt more and more impossible at times, and just like it's just never going to happen. And it's been something that I've struggled with a lot. Even before I was in treatment, I first started showing disordered behaviors with restricting and purging when I was 12. My parents didn't really take it seriously because I was a big girl, and that's not something that they really saw as a thing. My parents are also trash people. They were abusive, so I was kind of not really on their radar as much anyway. But as I got older, I just kept comparing myself to others and really struggling with just accepting my body as it is. And then eventually I ended up in treatment. And it was, like I said, it was definitely very hard, but I feel like as I've gone through the process, there's been a lot of ups and downs. Like even in 2019, like there was a stint where I thought I was doing well, and it just seemed like the eating disorder just kind of called back to me. It's that thought that like I can do it right this time. Like if I just go back to restricting and do it the right way, I won't need to end up in treatment. It won't get as bad as it did last time. And that's a thought that's kind of been pervasive throughout my recovery, is trying to not listen to that. And I definitely have felt like this whole thing, if I just try hard enough, then I'll be able to be an anorexic the right way. And it's just been, they're obviously not true. And no matter how many times I've tried to go back to it, it's been god awful. And this last time, before going to Renfrew, it seemed like my body had really had enough. I wasn't even losing anything this last relapse. It was just done. And but I was passing out a lot, which is a symptom I've never had before. That's the other thing too. Like I don't think we realize, especially like during the treatment process, that going back to eating disorder behaviors, at least for me, it got worse every single time. It's not like, oh, I went back and I had the same symptoms before. Like, yeah, maybe I did, but they were significantly worse. And it seems like they escalated every time I went back into a relapse. And the one in 2020 was probably the worst with my symptoms, like losing hair and like almost passing out. And like that one was really, really hard. And it's been a journey. But I think now, having been out of Renfrew for almost a year, because I went in September of last year. I actually was inpatient for the first time last year too, and that was a whole nother experience, because I'm like, I don't deserve to be here. There's nothing, I'm not like these other people. I'm fat. What do I know? It doesn't make any sense. And I think one of the good things that's happened is I've done a lot more intensive therapy around like body image and some of my trauma, which definitely feeds into my eating disorder. But yeah, I feel like now that I've been out for almost a year, things are definitely better. I'm not going to say they're perfect. I'm actually going through a stint right now where I'm having to kind of force myself to eat, and not so much because of like wanting to restrict, it probably is like in the back of my brain. You know how your brain kind of like tricks you and thinking like, oh, I'm just not really that hungry right now. I'll just eat in a little bit. Like those kind of sneaky thoughts come up. But then I'm also just like, I'm not really interested in food right now. And it's in those moments that I kind of have to be like, I know you're not, but you got to eat something. And I meet with a dietitian every week, and I had an issue with logging food at one point, but the app that I use with her doesn't ask me to log like calories or anything like that. It really just asks for like the hunger scale and like gives me a spot to note like how I was feeling during before the meal and stuff like that. So I think that's been helpful as far as like being able to process what's going on. But yeah, it's been hard, to be completely honest, but I feel like I'm in a decent enough spot, and like it's crazy like between being in Renfrew, um I think no, I blame Renfrew for this. um the thought that like I kind of have a recovery brain built in now, where it's like even the times I want to be disordered or like start going down that route or like think about counting calories again or whatever, my recovery brain is like, we shouldn't be doing this. We're not doing this. And it's kind of like, but I want to. It's like a back and forth sometimes. But it's I'm stuck with it now. And I think that's definitely something that I hope can give people some hope, is that like at some point it kind of something clicks where like even if you still have disordered thoughts, thank you, um that uh there's going to be something in there that kind of keeps us coming back to what we know. At least that's been my experience. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Asia, so much for talking with us and telling us a little bit about your story. And I think it's important to recognize like being an alum and being part of this discussion doesn't mean everything's got to be perfect. And like those thoughts can still be there, and that's part of recovery. So we're gonna move to Cheri next. Hopefully we are having a few technical difficulties. So Cheri, are you able to come off camera? I'm taking that as a no. So we will jump. We're practicing our own flexibility here, y'all. We will jump to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind coming on camera and introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your story.
Sure. So my name is Elizabeth Catanese, and my story, I think, begins like many people's stories in early childhood. So I was in a household where I felt not as much of a sense of control and a lot of a desire for perfection. Interestingly, less academically, but more in terms of social expectations, I think. I began using symptoms in high school when I was 16 and 17, and I did not receive treatment at that time. College was definitely a better time for me, which I think is not necessarily true for a lot of people. And I think that the reason for that is that it was a moment where I did feel a sense of real control and excitement and pleasure in my life, and friendship too. Like I made a lot of great friends in college. So, but after college, I became a teacher at an awesome private school for students with learning disabilities. And at that moment, I just threw myself into my work and into helping other people, and really, neglecting my own needs in the process. And eventually that coincided with a relationship a breakup, and my symptoms came back, and I decided with a strong push from my therapist to seek treatment. And I came to Renfrew in the intensive outpatient program. And I at first felt like that other people wanted me to be there, but that I, didn't want to be there and didn't really understand a lot of it, even like the terminology. I was like, what is this? I don't know what this is. maybe I should leave. But somehow I stuck it out, and I learned a lot of really interesting things. And one of them was the concept of mindfulness, and sitting with and being aware of my own emotions and my feelings, which is something I had really tried to suppress. I definitely was not interested in knowing what my emotions were. I was really interested in running from them and withdrawing as much as possible. So I learned that it was actually easier to be with my emotions no matter what they were. The other thing that happened is that I began to see connections between my queer identity and my eating disorder through what is now the SAGE group. And I did many years of outpatient groups to really help me to maintain a sense of recovery. And that allowed me to achieve some of my goals. I mean, recovery allowed me to become a published children's book author, which was a huge goal of mine. And then I wound up connecting with a colleague who suffers from chronic illness. And together we wrote a book called the College Mindfulness Workbook, which I have here, which is a lot of activities to help college students to be mindful. I now teach at Community College of Philadelphia as well. So I get to work with students. And I think even though I'm an English and humanities professor, I really am able to help to validate student identities and listen to student stories and help them, I think, through our discussion of literature, especially to think about how people are handling challenging things and how people handle change or don't handle change. And all of these concepts that are helpful to my recovery also come up in my work. And I also was able to become a single mom by choice of twin boys who are now almost 5 years old. So that has been a great journey as well.
Now I'm having technical difficulties of not clicking the button. All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And again, like, I think it's so cool that you were able to take something that initially was like, I don't know if I understand this stuff. And then really it's a passion now. And the workbook is so amazing and such a great resource for college students. So that's great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Stefanie, would you be able to come off camera and tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Stefanie Garcia. I am in Washington, D.C. I grew up not too far from here, and I was at Renfrew Spring Lane in 2003, which was quite some time ago. I had always struggled with body image. I was not symptomatic, but I'm an actress, and so being on stage and all that comes along with it is rife for body image issues, eating disorders. So I went to school in Manhattan and became symptomatic for the first time. And it was a reaction to dealing with a lot of stress and a lot of trauma. I was in Lower Manhattan on 9/11. So my first time on my own, 18 years old, dealing with the stress of that change. So I became symptomatic. I was symptomatic for a year. Very much thought, this is not a problem, everything is fine. But increasingly became aware that this was not sustainable, that I was very sick. And I called my parents and I said, I have an eating disorder. And I made the very difficult decision to take a semester off of school to go get help. And we heard about Renfrew. I went to Renfrew. It absolutely saved my life, changed my life entirely. I ended up taking a full year off of school, which was a very challenging decision to make. I really did not want to do that, but it was important. So I spent the year, I had support, nutritionist, psychiatrist, therapist, all of that, wonderful family, wonderful friends. And I returned to school, and it's been a journey, right? It was not a linear path. I did not come out of residential ready to take on the world and completely recovered. It took a long time. It took a lot of support. It was not all uphill. There were peaks and valleys, but everything that I learned at Renfrew, I have taken with me on my journey. And the one thing that I have learned most is about asking for help. I did not want to ask for help. I thought I was strong enough. I could do this by myself. Maybe I just need to go to therapy and it will be fine. But that is not true. It's not true for any of us. And asking for help is the strongest thing that you can do. And that has been what has kept me going in my recovery, is knowing that if I start thinking these thoughts, if I start moving down that path, asking for help, letting someone know, shuts that off or makes it easier to get back on the path. And Renfrew really taught me that I am worth that, right? That my recovery is, I deserve that recovery and the happiness of recovery. And I've become very fiercely protective of it. You go out in the world, you work wherever, and people are talking about food and people are talking about fitness. And at first I felt very uncomfortable, but I didn't feel like I could say anything. And then as I, took more steps, I realized my recovery is my responsibility. It is more important for me to take care of that than it is to make other people feel comfortable. So oftentimes I still didn't feel comfortable speaking up and saying, hey, I don't like that, but I would just walk away. That was how I protected myself. I deserve that. So Renfrew opened me up to just being able to say, I am worth that. I deserve this. Even though it's still a battle, you have challenges. I've recently been dealing with a lot of grief, and but having the support keeps me from going down the path of symptoms or kind of those thoughts or behaviors. I still have a therapist and as a psychiatrist. I work with them. It's not because it's a deep depressive situation. It's because it's maintenance for me. And I feel very privileged. I'm married. I have a beautiful little boy. I have a great support system, family and friends. I'm an actress. I just finished a musical. And so I don't know what I would look like now, what this would look like my life if I hadn't been to Renfrew and learned those lessons and stopped being so stubborn. I'm so stubborn. But asking for help that one time opened the door to everything else. So I love working with Renfrew. I love going to the reunions, going to the webinars. Just the work that Renfrew does is amazing. And we all deserve happiness and we all deserve recovery. You are worth it. I am worth it. Take care of yourself. Be loud if you need to be. Speak up about it, or just protect yourself in the way that makes sense to you. But you are worth it, is my message.
And I love that message, Stefanie. And I think it's so relatable that no, I've got this. I can do this on my own. I don't need this. And in reality, we all need support. We all need, other people. That's part of being independent, is knowing when we need other people. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We will have Cheri come on now. Cheri we're still experiencing technical difficulty. So Cheri, unfortunately, is not going to be able to be on camera with me. But Cheri, if you would like to come off of mute, I'm hoping you can still do that. We can hear from you. And we'll just know your name down there and it'll hopefully highlight you with the little yellow circle.
Hi, my name is Cheri. I am flustered right now. I'm currently living in Northeast Ohio. My pronouns are she, and I attended Spring Lane Residential in Philadelphia in fall of 2017 and again in January 2019. My eating disorder started behaviorally when I was 9 years old. So I did not know that's what it was. I began purging when I was 9. I'd always been a very picky eater, but I know now that it was because I am autistic. So I was diagnosed with anorexia at the age of 12, but I did not get treatment or anything because my parents also weren't great, but I had to wait 21 years to get treatment. I begged for it as a teenager, was told no. So when I was about to turn 30, I waited a year at a corporate job where I had health insurance that covered it. And I waited a year so it was covered under FMLA. And then I immediately got started to admit into Renfrew. I've known that I wanted to go to Renfrew since that documentary came out in, I think, 2002 or something. The documentary about it, but it's really the only one that I've ever treatments that I've ever heard of. So I just went there, and I liked how Spring Lane looked. It was my aesthetic. But yeah, when I finally did go to treatment, I wanted it forever. I've been very sick for 20 years. I knew I was going to die, so I met a lot of wonderful people there. And I think I was very grateful to be there. And I think it was my time in 2017 when I went. I didn't know that I was autistic or ADHD. I knew that my son was ADHD, but I didn't recognize that myself yet. I didn't know what it was. And so when I went for the first time, I really focused on E-stage and the learning the function of emotions was probably gave me the biggest foothold because I'd always been told that my emotions were a problem and I needed to control them. And the only way I knew how to control them was to stop feeling. So I think my story played a huge part in that and kind of playing this role of the messages that I heard I was supposed to be, the type of female I was supposed to be. But another part of that was that, I don't experience gender, I think, in the same way other people do. So I wasn't sure. I was just pretending to be something. This filled the expectations of what other people thought I should be. And but when I went to treatment for the first time in 2017, it took me 2 weeks to eat my meal plan 100%. I didn't trust that it would be okay. I'd never eaten that much food consistently in my entire life. We were very food insecure as kids. So the first time I did that, I found out that I had gastroparesis. So my luck would have it that my digestive system didn't work anymore. And that made recovery incredibly painful for the first year. And so in 2019, I had to go back because I developed a lot of medical complications. And it was very scary. Recovery, the first year of recovery is very dangerous, and especially if you have long-term use disorders. So I knew that in the back of my head, but I didn't think it would happen to me. So when I went back in 2019, it was just kind of to stop certain behaviors that had come back as a result of gastroparesis and some of the medical conditions that I developed. So that's when I found out that I was I was screened for ADHD, found out that my anxiety was not anxiety, it was just ADHD, and got tested. And since then, a lot of things have changed since finding that out about myself. Viewing my entire life through this different perspective was life-saving for me. And since then, I've got a college degree, and I now work with a company that hires autistic and ADHD people specifically, and I've learned how to ask for accommodation and speak up for myself and what I need, and I speak out against diet culture when I hear it at work, when I work for it, when I can. And I've kind of just become building a new, being more authentic to myself, and just being more of an advocate. Yeah.
Well, Cheri, first, I just have to say I loved the authenticity at the beginning of feeling flustered, because I think that's something we can all relate to on some Zoom call we've ever been on. And I think it's so great that you're able to share about, like, you know, that path of discovery that treatment really took you on, of like learning about yourself and understanding yourself more and what you need, and then being able to advocate for that is major. So I want to thank all of our alums for sharing their story, and invite y'all all to come back on camera. And Cheri, I've got my fingers crossed that we're gonna figure this out somehow. It's gonna magically happen. But we wanted to spend the second part of this kind of just having a conversation about treatment and recovery and your all's experiences as alumni. So I know we've had people kind of putting questions in the chat already, and I kind of wanted to start out with one that, you know, I'm just kind of wondering is like, how, like, one thing kind of from treatment that y'all feel like has stayed with you, that you've taken with you. And anyone can answer whenever they want. Everyone can even come off of mute.
I said before asking for help, but also finding that community, finding people who have a similar understanding of eating disorders. I'm not necessarily saying seeking out people who have or have had eating disorders, but I find that some of my closest friends are also the people who have struggled with this. So finding that community, staying involved with Renfrew. I have lobbied on the Hill for the Eating Disorder Coalition for policies. They're just about to pass a bill. Keeping in touch with that community so you don't feel alone.
Yeah. Well, and Stefanie, that's such a great point, especially given like what you said, there's so many other times in life we're surrounded by diet culture. And so to have that community also of people who are also, you know, rolling their eyes at like, oh my God, seriously, if Sharon in accounting could just stop talking about that diet, I would be so much happy. Like, can be really helpful to know we're not by ourselves. And I apologize to anyone here named Sharon that also works in accounting. It was not a targeted attack.
I also feel like, similar to Stefanie, I've kind of taken it upon myself, like, after learning that being anorexic is not like a skinny white person disorder, like that was literally eye-opening for me, because I didn't understand that I could be anorexic and in a larger body. So for me, just that very first time in Renfrew, learning that has really catapulted me into wanting to be a more advocate for eating disorders. I'm a singer, and a big part of my platform is talking about mental health, and eating disorder recovery is a huge part of that. And I share things on my Instagram about recovery, the struggles with recovery as well. And I still have, speaking of the community aspect, I still have a lot of friends from way back in 2019. One of my best friends has been with me ever since we were in treatment. And it's nice to have that community that kind of is like, yeah, me too, bro. Like, to kind of be in the comments, and like, it's nice to help people and that are either have never been exposed to eating disorder treatment, or have struggled with disordered eating and felt like they weren't worthy of treatment, or the people that are currently in recovery and just kind of need someone to be like, yeah, this shit still fucking sucks right now. And just like that's been really important for me moving forward. And I have to give Renfrew credit for that, for putting that like in my head to want to be that person for others.
And for me too, I think, being able to feel that it is really worthwhile to kind of create new representations, and really validate identity wherever possible. So I'm working on projects that are about, creating work that is not triggering for people, but that is also, really revealing some of the struggles with eating disorders, and like how culture kind of helps to create that. And I think that also started along with the mindfulness stuff for sure, in my time at Renfrew.
How about one of the questions we got in the Q&A was about kind of more specifically for you all talked about kind of getting treatment a little bit later in life. Asia, you talked about that stereotype of like skinny white girl, and it's also usually skinny young white girl. And this idea that it is not that really we can struggle with our eating disorder at any size, at any race, at any time in life, and kind of what it was like for you all to go through treatment maybe at a time when you weren't expecting it.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the questions. Oh shit, hi Stefanie. We were in treatment together in 2019, I think. But yeah, getting it later on was kind of validating, to be honest, because it was like, I'm not crazy. Like, it was sad that it took that long to get the help that I needed. And it was like way overdue. Going from 12 to, I think I was 25, 26 when I first went into treatment. So that's 13 years of untreated anorexia and purging disorder. So it was nice to finally get the help. And what was the other part of the question? I have ADHD too. So whoever mentioned that earlier, my brain is everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
I think you answered it, just that it was kind of validating to say, to have it said like, no, this is an issue. This isn't just something that you have to live with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheri, you're here. It happened.
Yay.
Can you hear me?
I think we can hear you.
Yeah, now we
A
can
little
hear
bit,
you.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I have to log in on my phone.
Okay. How about for others going into treatment, maybe at a point in life when it wasn't, you didn't think it would be a problem? I think about, we all have these ideas of like, oh, and at this point in my life, X, Y, and Z will happen. And it's not often that it's like, oh, and at this point in life, I'll go to treatment. Like, that's my plan.
I had that in high school. As soon as I graduated, I would get better.
Cheri, can you say that again? It was picking up you on both cameras. So we've got you visually on one and it sounds like sound on the other. Oh, now we lost you.
Should I go in the meantime? Maybe?
Yeah,
Oh.
sorry, I don't.
Oh, no.
I guess I'm just not gonna camera. But yeah, I had that in high school. That's what I think got me through high school. Was that as soon as I graduate high school, I'll get treatment, and then as soon as I get a job, I have to health insurance treatment.
Oh, Cheri, can you move your mic a little bit closer to your mouth? It's kind of cutting in and out, I think.
Can you hear me now?
It's very quiet. I feel like I'm in an old Verizon commercial, y'all. Yeah, Elizabeth, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. For me, I actually did struggle with feeling not as connected to other people who were in treatment. There was, I mean, on the one hand, there were people who were the same age as I was, so that was really good. But I felt that a lot of the identities that were represented did not connect, or were clashing with sort of what I needed at the time, and it was sort of confusing. But then when I got into the LGBTQIA plus group, I felt like tremendously connected, and that was really helpful. And I also think the kind of diversity was ultimately useful, but I was already feeling, coming in, with the eating disorder, somewhat of a lack of belonging, just in general, and in my body and in myself. And then seeing such a range of people, I think it was really overwhelming for me.
Mm-hmm. Stefanie, any thoughts?
I was in residential at a time when most of the women were all my age or a little younger. So we all had somewhat similar lived experiences. So that was nice for me to be able to kind of connect that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's so interesting because it's like there's so many different ways we can find that community in recovery, right? Like it can be by people and their lived experiences. It can be just by like, oh man, like I've got that emotion too that I really hate to tolerate feeling and like don't feel good about it, or whatever else it might be. But that idea that you guys kind of all touched on was, let me like find that community in one way or another. How did you all, if you all ever experienced this with treatment fatigue, kind of getting that point, and it can even, I feel like it can happen in recovery when you're out of treatment, where it's like, I don't know that I'm just so tired of having to tolerate these emotions and deal with these behaviors and not act on the urges. And how do you all kind of handle that and work with that?
For me, I like to keep focused on the things in life that I really want to be happening and that I feel are really important. So now I have my kids, and I'm really interested in and often fail at being a present mother, but I really am devoted to that. I want to have the energy to do my writing. I want to be a good friend to other people. So reminding myself of the things that are really pleasurable in my life helps me with feeling that the fatigue is worth it. But I also feel like there isn't enough support in the world to help people with their recovery fatigue. If one is privileged enough to go to Renfrew, that is great, but you still may not be able to have like the level of support that's needed. And many people don't have the privilege to attend Renfrew. So I think societally and culturally, we have an attitude of like, just stick with recovery. You got this, come on. But it would be easier if the world were set up to be more supportive in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It feels like there's a lot of like, just keep pushing, you can do this, like, and like even to the like remembering like the things that are important to your life. At least for me, it was kind of like, remember all the things that are your goals and all that stuff, and let that motivate you. And honestly, I was like, I don't give a fuck about that right now. dude, I don't want to hear it. I'm tired. I'm sick and I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore. I think what's been really helpful for me, and I saw the person that answered that asked the question, is just being kind to myself and being like, this is just where I'm at right now. And I'm going to do the very best I can at this moment. And if I'm not encouraging this, and Aaron, stop me if I'm saying the wrong thing. If it means doing the bare minimum or even a little less than the bare minimum, that is okay. Just the most important thing is eventually getting back to where you should be, but do what you can. And I think as a parent, how I would like someone to react to me is just being like, I'm sorry that you're struggling, but I'm here. If you need to just vent and just talk about how painful this is right now, I'm here to listen. Like, I know I was at PHP in Mount Laurel this last time, and there was plenty of room for discussion about stuff like that, about how hard it is right now and just the reality of recovering from an eating disorder, especially when you're just coming out of res. Even in recovery now, it's nice to have spaces where you can just talk about the reality of how difficult things can be. And that self-compassion piece is so important, because like Elizabeth was saying, and like the beginning of my point, that like this pushing and pushing and pushing thing is not helpful all the time. That's not what everybody needs. And we just need to be cognizant of the fact that we're real people with real emotions and feelings, and we needed to be treated that way, not like workhorses. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not going back on the bare minimum thing. Everyone was nodding along, and I was like, this would be real bad if I was like, no.
Eat your full meal plan every single day and have dessert all the time.
I think what it is it's that idea, kind of like you're saying, Asia, of understanding that like there are going to be times where, I like this idea. I had another therapist say this to me one time. We're all giving 100% on any given day. It's just that 100% on any given day is going to look different every single day.
Yeah.
Because the day that I don't get as much sleep because the dogs wake me up in the middle of the night, like that's good. That 100% is going to look real different than the days that it's like, I got to sleep in. It was super restful. Got my REM sleep. We're good. Like, it doesn't mean I'm still not giving 100. It just means that 100% looks different. And sometimes that 100% is like, look, I just did the basics.
Yeah. Maybe it was Renfrew that taught me that, because I've been saying that all the time, like that 100%, that at any given moment I'm doing the very best that I can, and trying to remind myself of that. So maybe it was y'all that taught me that. So kudos to Renfrew. Sorry, Cheri, I didn't mean to talk over you.
You're fine. I had when I was down from residential, I went to the Emily program here in Cleveland, from at home. But I had that a lot with some of their ideas, like you're doing your best and you can do better. That message, I think, for me at least, was really harmful, because I was at a point where I was trying to learn how to be gentle with myself, and I was being given these messages. I'm sure were helpful for a lot of people, but for me, they weren't, and I would push back on that in treatment, and I think it would get me in trouble sometimes. But yeah, I think for me, just learning that I've been, things that are easy for a lot of people are very hard for me. And I think I've been giving 6,000% for so much of my life that I think I didn't know what 100% was. So that was something that kind of stuck with me for these past 3 years. That I consider myself covered, but yeah, just learning to let go of those expectations that society has for us to be productive all the time. It's really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Cheri, that it's like we've got to be gentle with ourselves, you know, that self-compassion piece. And it can be really hard when people are well-meaning and are saying like, you're doing the best you can and do better. And it's like, but you just told me I was doing the best I can. What if I can't do better? And I think being able to say, you know, I'm doing the best I can, and I'm really proud of that right now. I'm not saying it's my stopping point. I'm just saying I'm going to sit and like let myself be proud in this moment that like this is what I'm doing, and I'm still showing up, and I'm still doing this, because it's a balancing act, right? You know, and it's tough because you all like want to keep moving forward, and we've got to give credit to like where we are, and that it's not linear, and that can be hard to balance on both sides. Yeah. Great point, Cheri. How have you all kind of worked on kind of talking about your eating disorder with family and friends, and kind of throughout life as you've continued on in recovery?
I was actually just typing an answer to this because I wasn't sure if we were gonna hit it. I'm not sure how long we're going. Anyway, so I'll be quick. I was just saying that I think it's very important to do a lot of trial and error, because there are some people that are going to be very supportive and some people that are just going to be like, why is that an issue? Just eat a burger, or like stop binging, or whatever it is. Like they can be very diet culture is so pervasive in our lives, and in my family specifically, that it's hard. It's definitely been hard. Like I've shared with my mom about my eating disorder. Obviously she knows, and she's been less than supportive. She actually blamed my worsening chronic illness on the fact that I've gained so much weight, and knowing that I have anorexia and I lost it that day and needed a lot of help. So like she is not someone that I can share details about my eating disorder with. However, I do also have friends that I'm very close with, that if I tell them, hey, I'm really struggling to eat right now, they'll give me unending support and will volunteer to eat with me. So it's like, unfortunately it's trial and error to see who you can share with. But like, once somebody, put it this way, once somebody shows you their true colors, believe them. Like take it at face value, like, okay, this is not a safe person versus this is a safe person. And I feel like talking to people with eating disorders, or that are in a decent spot in recovery specifically, because you don't want to fall back with someone that's not doing well, or like trigger each other, can also be really helpful, just to have somebody who understands what you're going through, as like a backup if family and friends aren't really on board with recovery, especially because what everything that Renfrew teaches is so contradictory to what diet culture is. It's the exact opposite, and it's insane.
Yeah, for sure. I can speak to that too. Like I didn't really keep my family in the loop too much, just because they've been so against it for so long. When I finally got treatment, I was like, pushing on my own. And I think I found my own community of friends through just the support groups in the local area. I'm saying my coworkers were super amazing and supportive, and yeah. But as I'm in a larger body now than I've ever been, and I think I end up having to decide whether or not people are safe in the medical community, and somebody with chronic illness as well, having to explain to many specialists that, you know, my weight isn't, my issue's not due to my weight, and yet that really at this point I tend to hide my own disorder from the medical community anymore, because I find it causes more issues when I get dismissed because of my use, especially because I have connective tissue, issues and stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, I have to do a lot of deciding whether or not.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Cheri, like figuring out like, okay, when when can I be open and honest with this, and when is it safe, and when doesn't it feel as safe, and when do I need to kind of pull back a little bit?
I was at work and I mentioned that, I was in recovery and blah, blah, blah. And this woman was like, oh my gosh, well, what was your lowest weight? I'm like, I'm just gonna, and I just said, I don't really talk about that, and kind of escaped quickly. So, and yeah, I thought that would be a safe person to talk to. She was not. And I made very sure that my boundaries around her were clear. I think my therapist at the time said, sometimes you have to protect yourself from people, and it's not rude and it's not mean, but that you have to protect yourself. So the information that you share with people is up to you.
Yeah, I think we had somebody at Spring Lane. I can't remember her name now. I think she's retired or something, but she always say, "Oh, to give your own secrets." And I think my brain just got literally so much overshare. And but yeah, I that's something I've been doing this past year, especially to keep certain parts of myself to myself. And that's enough, because you want everybody to know everything.
Mhm.
It hurts me to work out that.
Elizabeth, any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that, I just, at the end of the day, I very much still care what other people think. I think it's like a chronic thing that's like embedded in my brain, and I've made huge progress with it. But for me, talking about my eating disorder is another form of coming out. So it's sort of like double exhaustion, like I may have somebody who's supportive of my, identity in that way, but like who, when I talk about my eating disorder, it's like a different thing entirely. So I think that the message of self-protection is good, like making sure that you are sharing in a way that is not going to make you so exhausted that you fall back into, disordered eating patterns or something like that. For me, doing writing is helpful because that is very safe, and I can choose the point at which I want to share it. And, there is kind of like more of a, at times, anonymous feeling to it, even though my name is attached to it. I'm not talking directly to the people who read it a lot of the time. So I think just understanding that it's a really hard thing, that it's brave when you do it, even when it works well, and just giving yourself a lot of credit for sharing and trying to build community when you can is a good idea.
Well, and I love, I remember talking with people before and having the joke be that my answer to everything was, it depends. And I feel like it's such a reality, like in the work you all are doing, that, it depends. It depends on the person. It depends on where they are in their life. It depends on where you are in your life. And giving yourself that flexibility, I think, is such an important piece. And I'm aware that we're at one more minute and we are not going to get to everyone's questions. So I do apologize for that. I wish we could honestly talk about this all night, but I don't want to take any more of our wonderful alums' time. So if you have questions that didn't get answered, please email them to alumni@renfrewcenter.com, and we can reach out to our wonderful alums here or the whole group and say, hey, give us your thoughts on this, or help you find whatever support you need. And I want to end with a question of one thing from Renfrew that y'all have kind of kept with you in your recovery journey. This could be a tangible thing. It could be like, I stole this pen from residential and I still have it. Or it could be more of a memory or a thought.
I am surrounded by things that I have at Renfrew. And this is 20 years later. I made this little statue. It sits on my desk. I have framed artwork from people there, artwork I made. Like I went through something really traumatic last year, and butterflies were my thing at Renfrew, so I got a butterfly tattoo. I can look at it every day and say, I did this. So I have a lot of Renfrew just stuff around.
I like it, Stefanie.
Yeah, I have all of my artwork, and I also have a lean in tattoo on my, that's the first tattoo I ever got. It was on my calf in 2017. I remember I called my friend at the time, and he's been telling me to get it. I called him from Renfrew, and I was like, I know what I'm going to get. And it seems I've last 2 weeks on my leg, and then I was, and so that's one of the things I remind myself of about the lean into being present and not feeling.
Cheri, I love that, because the lean in phrase, like it gets used so much now with the UT, especially, to like have that reminder. I love that. That's the tattoo, the first tattoo you got. Very cool.
I agree that lean in is definitely something that's stuck with me. That didn't even occur to me until right now when Cheri mentioned it, but that is something, it may not be those exact words, but it's definitely something that I carry with me to kind of like, all right, this sucks, but let me feel what's going on. Let's evaluate what's happening and try to work through it. But also the community that I found at Renfrew, every time people ask me like, oh, what treatments, like going into treatment or like coming out like, oh, where have you been? Different treatment centers. I'm like, yo, Renfrew was great for the community. Like UT is great, all that stuff is great, but the way that we all loved and cared about each other as patients and supported each other was the most beautiful thing. And it was people of all ages, all races, all genders, and that meant a lot to me. And like I was saying earlier, I still have really close friends from treatment, and they mean the world to me. And like Renfrew definitely brought those people into my life.
Yeah, I was connected with high school students at 30. So I agree with that.
So I have a Nita necklace that is part of like my headshot. So that is good and a good reminder. For me, it's like a lot of mental images that I remember. It was such a time of like heightened awareness, and in some senses a time of, of trauma. Like treatment itself can feel like trauma, a very useful trauma, but like I have these pictures of different moments. And I sometimes think of them when I'm struggling. It's not that I'm like, let me think of a moment, but it actually comes into my head. And one of them is making these, somehow I was making a sculpture. I don't know how this was part of it exactly, but it was like in the corner of the Radnor location, and we were putting beads onto this wire and just like working with the beads, and it was like an interactive sculpture where people were taking, at the end would take beads, and just being in that corner building something is an image that comes back to me quite a lot.
Very cool. And I love that you all highlighted the different things that, you get through going through treatment, and I loved and really appreciate y'all's honesty about the fact that this isn't just a straight line, and it's not just everything just continually gets better and it's great. Like the reality is, we have an alumni network because we know that you need that community as you move forward. And I am so grateful to have all of you on here tonight and take this time out of your week and away from supports and families and pets and all of that, and be able to say like, hey, I want to give back in this way. So I really want to say thank you all so much. This is my favorite position in Renfrew because I get to interact with you all so much. And I really want to thank everyone who joined us tonight and was able to hear the stories. And if we didn't get to your question, I really, really apologize. but please email us at Renfrew Center or alumni@renfrewcenter.com. It'd be helpful to give you the name. Thank you all again so much, and thank you for taking the time. Bye, everyone.